Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're truly thankful for your continued support. Quick question for our viewers. Which country or city are you watching from? We love knowing how far these stories reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Return. Nolan Foster stepped out of the taxi, his shoulders aching from the 14-hour flight. 3 months in Singapore establishing the Asia-Pacific branch of his security firm had been exhausting but successful. He'd closed deals worth millions, expanded their global footprint, and was finally home. The moment he saw the red and white for sale sign plunged into his manicured front lawn, he felt his stomach drop. There had to be some mistake. He paid the driver absently, his eyes fixed on the sign, swaying gently in the autumn breeze. The colonial-style house with its dark blue shutters had been his wedding gift to Vanessa 5 years ago. She'd fallen in love with the wraparound porch and the maple trees that turned brilliant orange every fall. Right now, those same trees framed a scene that made no sense. Nolan pulled out his phone, scrolling past dozens of international business contacts until he found his wife's number. It rang 6 times before she answered. "Hey, it's me. I'm home," he said, keeping his voice even. "There's a for sale sign in our yard." Vanessa's laugh floated through the speaker, a sound once familiar and comforting, now suddenly alien. "We sold a house. Find a new place." "What?" Nolan felt the ground tilt under him. "What do you mean we sold? I never signed anything." "Surprise. Power of attorney comes in handy," she said with an airy tone that sent chills down his spine. That document had been for emergencies, signed before his deployment to Afghanistan years ago, before they were even married. He'd forgotten it existed. Apparently, she hadn't. "What about my stuff?" he asked, his mouth dry. Her snicker made his blood run cold. "Threw it all away." In the background, a male voice rumbled with laughter. The sound hit Nolan like a physical blow. He stood motionless on the lawn he'd seated himself, staring at the house he'd painted with his own hands, while his world collapsed. "Fine," he said finally, his voice deceptively calm. "But don't regret it." Then he hung up. Inside the house, his house, Nolan found drawers emptied, closets cleared. His clothes, his medals for military service, the watches his grandfather had left him, all gone. In their bedroom, unfamiliar clothes hung in the closet beside Vanessa's things. Men's shirts, large shoes. In the office, his desk had been cleared, papers shredded. Only his laptop safe remained, bolted to the floor and requiring his fingerprint to open. Inside was his backup laptop, emergency cash, and passport. Items Vanessa couldn't access. Small mercies. Nolan sat on the floor of his empty office and tried to think rationally. He'd built his security business from nothing after leaving the military. As a former Army Ranger, he'd specialized in high-risk extraction operations. He knew how to plan, how to remain calm under pressure. Those skills would serve him now. He called his closest friend, former Ranger teammate Damon Wolf. "I need a place to crash," Nolan said when Damon answered. "For how long?" Damon asked without hesitation. "Until I figure out what the hell just happened to my life." 3 hours later, Nolan sat in Damon's apartment overlooking the river, nursing a whiskey. Damon leaned against the kitchen counter, his prosthetic leg propped comfortably, listening as Nolan recounted the day's events. "So, she's been planning this the whole time you were in Singapore," Damon said, his voice tight with anger. "Any idea who the guy is?" Nolan shook his head. "Not yet, but I will." He took another sip. "They think they've won. They think I'll just roll over." A cold smile crossed his lips. "They have no idea who they're dealing with." "What are you going to do?" Damon asked. "First, I'll find out everything. Then," Nolan's eyes hardened, "I'll make them wish they'd never met me." "I'm in," Damon said instantly. "Whatever you need." Nolan nodded, grateful. In the military, they'd had a code: leave no man behind. In the darkest moments of combat, that brotherhood had been their salvation. He'd need it again now. As night fell, Nolan began to plan. By morning, he would know who had stolen his wife. By the end of the week, he would understand how deeply the betrayal went. And then, with the precision and patience that had kept him alive in war zones, he would orchestrate a response that neither of them would see coming. They think this is over, he murmured, watching the city lights shimmer on the water. It hasn't even begun. Chapter 2. Revelation. The man sleeping in Nolan's bed was Perry Thornton, real estate developer and Vanessa's boss for the past 18 months. It took Damon's security contacts less than a day to identify him. Within 48 hours, Nolan had a complete profile, twice divorced, known for targeting wealthy, married women, with a reputation for cutting corners in business deals. Currently developing a luxury residential tower downtown, the Thornton, using investors' money, including, Nolan discovered with a sickening lurch, nearly $2 million of his own savings. She transferred everything from your joint accounts 3 weeks ago, said Layla Braddock, Nolan's attorney, sliding documents across her desk. Unfortunately, with joint accounts, that's legal. The house sale is more complicated. The power of attorney you gave her was intended for medical emergencies, not property transactions. Can we challenge it? Nolan asked. Layla's dark eyes narrowed. Yes, but it gets messy. You need to prove she deliberately misused it, which means a lengthy court battle. And meanwhile, she has my money and my house is sold. Nolan concluded. The sale closes in 3 weeks, Layla confirmed. If you want to stop it, we need to move fast. Nolan drummed his fingers on the desk. What if I don't want to stop it? Layla raised an eyebrow. Explain. What if I let them think they've won? Let them believe I'm just going to walk away. A slow smile spread across Layla's face. You're planning something. I'm gathering intelligence. Nolan corrected. First rule of combat. Know your enemy. That evening, Nolan sat on Damon's balcony, scrolling through their joint financial records. Vanessa had been methodical, transferring funds in increasing amounts over 6 months. The final transfer, $1.8 million, had happened the day after he'd left for Singapore. But something didn't add up. She didn't just take my money, Nolan said when Damon joined him. She invested it in Thornton's project. Why not just take it and run? Damon mused. Exactly. And why sell a house? They could have just changed the locks. Damon tapped his prosthetic thoughtfully. Maybe they needed the capital for something specific. Nolan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should see what's happening at the Thornton site tomorrow. 9 a.m. What the hell? Damon peered over his shoulder. I have no idea, Nolan said, frowning. But I think we have plans for tomorrow morning. At 8:45 a.m., Nolan and Damon parked across from the Thornton construction site. A small crowd had gathered, men in hard hats and safety vests looking confused, women in business attire checking their phones anxiously. A sleek black car pulled up, and Perry Thornton emerged, Vanessa right behind him. Thornton looked harried, his normally perfect appearance disheveled. Vanessa's face was tight with stress. Something's wrong, Damon observed. They watched as Thornton addressed the crowd, his gestures becoming increasingly agitated. Workers began shouting. One man pushed forward, jabbing a finger into Thornton's chest. Nolan's phone buzzed again. Construction halted. Funding disappeared. Your money is gone. Who is sending these? Damon asked. I don't know, Nolan replied. But they're trying to help me. A woman detached from the crowd and approached their car. As she drew closer, Nolan recognized her. Sophia Reynolds, Thornton's executive assistant, whom he'd met at a charity gala last year. Sophia slid into the back seat without invitation. They're telling everyone it's a temporary delay, she said without preamble. It's not. The project is underwater. Has been for months. Why are you telling me this? Nolan asked. Sophia's eyes flashed. Because he did the same thing to my sister 2 years ago. Seduced her, took her money, left her with nothing. He's a predator. And Vanessa? Nolan asked, his throat tight. She started as a victim. Now she's an accomplice. Sophia handed him a flash drive. Account numbers, wire transfers, investor lists. It's all there. Why not go to the police? Damon asked. Sophia smiled grimly. Because Thornton has half the city council in his pocket. Because the legal system favors men like him. And because... Her eyes locked with Nolan's. I've seen your work. In Dubai, when you extracted that executive's daughter from those kidnappers. Nolan's face remained impassive, but his mind raced. That operation had been completely off the books. If Sophia knew about it, Sometimes justice needs a different kind of approach, she finished. I'll be in touch. After she left, Damon whistled. Well, that just changed everything. Not everything, Nolan said, pocketing the flash drive. Just the timeline. That night, Nolan reviewed the files. Thornton was running a sophisticated investment scheme, using money from new investors to pay returns to earlier ones while skimming millions for himself. The Thornton was meant to be his masterpiece and his escape plan. Once the building was completed, he would sell the units at massive profits and disappear with the proceeds. But there was a problem. The construction company had discovered serious issues with the foundation. Fixing it required capital Thornton didn't have. That's where Nolan's money came in. Emergency funds to keep the project alive. So they weren't just stealing from me, Nolan told Damon. They needed my money to save their scheme. And now that money's gone, Damon noted. Yes, Nolan said, a cold smile forming. Now it's gone. Because 8 months earlier, before any of this began, Nolan had set up an alert system on all his accounts. Any transaction over $10,000 would trigger a notification. When the first large transfer occurred, he had been concerned but not alarmed. Vanessa occasionally made investment decisions. By the third transfer, he had begun quietly monitoring. And by the time he left for Singapore, he had already moved most of their liquid assets to offshore accounts, leaving just enough in the joint accounts to see what Vanessa would do. The money that had supposedly been transferred to Thornton's project, $1.8 million, had actually gone to a shell company Nolan controlled. From there, it had been moved through a series of transactions designed to be trackable only to a certain point, where it seemingly vanished. They think they stole from me, Nolan said, closing the laptop. But I've been 10 steps ahead the whole time. So what now? Damon asked. Now, Nolan replied. We turn the pressure up. Chapter 3. Infiltration. The home Vanessa and Perry now shared, a penthouse in the exclusive Riverfront Towers, had state-of-the-art security. For most people, it would be impenetrable. For Nolan Foster, it was Tuesday. Building schematics, security rotation, and access codes, Sophia said, sliding a folder across the table in the quiet corner of the cafe. The night guard on Tuesdays is Brett Mitchell. He takes a 30-minute break at 2 a.m., like clockwork. Why are you doing this? Nolan asked, not touching the folder. Sophia sipped her coffee. I told you about my sister. What I didn't tell you is that after Perry ruined her, she killed herself. Her voice remained steady, but her knuckles whitened around her cup. The police called it depression. I call it murder. Nolan studied her. Revenge won't bring her back. I'm not looking for revenge, Sophia replied. I'm looking for justice. For her, for you, and for 26 other investors who have no idea they're about to lose everything. Nolan nodded and finally took the folder. Justice it is. That night, Nolan reviewed his plan with Damon and their new ally, Reese Parker, a former military intelligence specialist who now worked for Nolan's security firm. The goal isn't just to get evidence, Nolan explained. It's to understand exactly what they're planning. Once we know that, we could dismantle it piece by piece. And if they catch you? Reese asked. They won't, Nolan said simply. At precisely 1:55 a.m., Nolan entered the service entrance of Riverfront Towers, wearing a maintenance uniform and carrying a toolbox. As Sophia had promised, at 2 a.m., Brett Mitchell left his post for his break. Nolan moved swiftly, using the access code to enter the utility elevator that would take him to the penthouse level. The penthouse itself required a key card, which Sophia had been unable to provide. But Nolan hadn't spent a decade in high-risk security work without learning a few tricks. A small device attached to the card reader bypassed the system in less than 30 seconds. Inside, the penthouse was dark and silent. Nolan moved through the space with practiced ease, placing miniature cameras and listening devices in strategic locations. In Thornton's home office, he found a laptop. Working quickly, he inserted a flash drive containing a program that would allow him remote access to the device. As he was about to leave, he heard footsteps in the hallway. Vanessa. He slipped into a closet just as she entered the office, speaking on her phone. Perry, the investors are getting suspicious. We need to show progress on the site, or they'll start demanding their money back. Her voice was tense. No, I haven't heard from Nolan. He's probably licking his wounds somewhere. He was always weaker than he looked. Nolan's jaw tightened, but he remained motionless. The account is almost empty, Vanessa continued. The transfer should have gone through by now. What do you mean it didn't arrive? That's not possible. Check again. There was a long pause. If the money isn't there, where is it? Another pause. Well, find it. We can't afford any more delays. If this falls apart, her voice dropped to a whisper. We'll lose everything. She ended the call and stood there, breathing heavily. Then she opened a drawer, pulled out a bottle of pills, and downed two with a glass of water from the desk. After she left, Nolan waited 5 minutes before emerging. In the master bedroom, he paused. On Vanessa's nightstand sat a framed photo, not of Perry, but of herself and Nolan on their wedding day. The incongruity of it struck him like a physical blow. For a fleeting moment, he remembered the woman he'd fallen in love with, brilliant, ambitious kind. What had happened to her? What had happened to them? He pushed the thought away. The woman in that photo was gone, if she had ever existed at all. The woman who had stolen his money, sold his house, and discarded his possessions. That was the real Vanessa. Nolan completed his task and exited the penthouse. By the time Brett Mitchell returned from his break, Nolan was 3 blocks away, walking calmly back to his car. Did you get what we need? Damon asked when Nolan returned to the apartment. And then some, Nolan replied. They can't find the money. They're panicking. Reese grinned. Good. Panic people make mistakes. Yes, they do, Nolan agreed. But we don't. Everything we do from here on out has to be precise and untraceable. We're not just dealing with Vanessa and Perry now. If Sophie is right about their connections, we're taking on some powerful people. So what's the play? Damon asked. Nolan smiled grimly. We become their worst nightmare. We become invisible, unstoppable, and completely merciless. Over the next week, Nolan's team monitored the surveillance devices. They listened as Perry and Vanessa argued about the missing money, as they reassured increasingly agitated investors, as they scrambled to find alternative funding. The construction site remained idle, workers unpaid and mutinous. They're meeting with someone named Raymond Bennett tomorrow, Reese reported after reviewing the latest recordings. From what I can gather, he's a last resort lender. The kind who charges 30% interest and breaks kneecaps when you miss payments. That's a desperate move, Damon observed. They are desperate, Nolan said, and about to get more so. The next day, Perry and Vanessa arrived at Raymond Bennett's office, only to find federal agents executing a search warrant. Bennett, it seemed, had been arrested on racketeering charges overnight. Their final hope for funding had just vanished. Coincidence? Damon asked when they received the news. I don't believe in coincidences, Nolan replied, his phone buzzing with a text from Sophia. Bennett's files included records of his dealings with Perry. Feds will be looking at him next. The noose is tightening, Damon said. Nolan nodded, and they haven't even realized they're hanging yet. Chapter 4. Escalation. 3 weeks after his return, Nolan sat in Layla Braddock's office, signing papers that would officially transfer ownership of his home to the Patterson family, a young couple excited for their first major purchase. Are you sure about this? Layla asked, watching him sign away the house he'd once loved. The house isn't the point, Nolan replied. It's just a building. And the proceeds? Into escrow, as we discussed. Layla nodded, satisfied. Your counterpetition for divorce has been filed. Vanessa's lawyers will receive it tomorrow. Good. Make sure they see the financial disclosures. Layla's lips curved into a rare smile. They'll see exactly what you want them to see. A man nearly wiped out, with just enough assets left to make it worth pursuing. As Nolan left the law office, his phone rang. It was Sophia. Perry just fired me, she said without preamble. Said the company is restructuring and my position has been eliminated. We expected that, Nolan reminded her. He knows someone's working against him. He's eliminating potential leaks. Yes, but he also locked me out of the system. My access codes have been revoked. Nolan frowned. Can you still get into the building? My key card works, but not for secure areas. That's enough. Meet me at the cafe in an hour. When Sophia arrived, Nolan was already there with Reese. They'd secured a private room in the back, away from prying eyes. Perry's making mistakes, Nolan said as Sophia sat down. Firing you was predictable but sloppy. He's burning bridges he might need later. The investors are demanding a meeting, Sophia reported. They've seen the construction stoppage and heard rumors. Perry scheduled an information session for Friday. Perfect timing, Reese murmured, glancing at Nolan. What happens Friday? Sophia asked. The first domino falls, Nolan replied. That Friday, as anxious investors gathered in the Thornton Development Group's conference room, Nolan and Damon watched from a cafe across the street. Package delivered? Nolan asked. Damon nodded. 10 minutes ago. Inside the conference room, Perry Thornton was attempting to reassure his investors when his assistant rushed in, handing him an envelope. The color drained from his face as he read its contents. What did you send him? Damon asked. Bank statements, Nolan replied, showing exactly where the money went and who took it, but not the real statements. No, these ones implicate Perry in embezzling funds for personal use. Gambling debts, luxury purchases, offshore accounts. And Vanessa? These documents show her as another victim. For now, Damon looked surprised. Why protect her? I'm not protecting her, Nolan corrected. I'm isolating her. When this is over, I want her alone, without allies, facing the consequences of her choices. Across the street, the investor meeting had dissolved into chaos. Several men were shouting, one woman was crying, and Perry Thornton stood frozen, the papers clutched in his hand. Nolan's phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. Police have received anonymous evidence of financial crimes at Thornton Development. Warrants pending. Your mystery helper again? Damon asked. Not mine, Nolan said thoughtfully. I think Sophia has another ally inside, someone with access and motivation. That evening, Nolan returned to Damon's apartment to find Vanessa waiting outside, pacing nervously. How did you find me? He asked, his voice neutral. I called everyone we know, she admitted. Her carefully maintained appearance had slipped. Her hair was limp, her designer clothes wrinkled. Nolan, we need to talk. Now you want to talk? After destroying my life? After stealing my money and selling my house? His tone remained calm, but his eyes were cold. It's not what you think, she pleaded. Perry's the one who took the money. He told me you had agreed to invest. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. And selling our house? Throwing away my possessions? Was that also Perry's idea? Vanessa looked away. I was angry. You were gone all the time. The business always came first. So you decided to punish me by committing fraud? Nolan laughed without humor. Try again. I made a mistake, she whispered. A terrible mistake. But Perry is dangerous. He has connections. If I tried to leave him, if I exposed him, save it. Nolan cut her off. The police will be arresting Perry soon. Financial crimes, wire fraud, investment scams. And guess whose name is all over the documentation? Here's a hint. Not yours. Vanessa's eyes widened. What? The evidence they're receiving shows you as another victim. You get a clean slate. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. Not because you deserve it, but because I want you to understand exactly what you threw away. Nolan, I filed for divorce. My lawyer will contact yours. Don't come here again. He walked past her into the building, not looking back. Inside, Damon was waiting. Didn't expect to see her here. She's running scared, Nolan said. Perry's world is collapsing, and she's looking for an escape route. And you just gave her one. For now. Nolan's phone buzzed again. Sophia. Perry's been arrested, she reported when he answered. The FBI raided his office this afternoon. And Vanessa? Not charged. Not yet. But they're investigating everyone connected to the company. Good. Keep me posted. Nolan ended the call and turned to Damon. Phase 1 complete. Perry is neutralized. What's Phase 2? Nolan's expression hardened, making sure Vanessa understands the definition of regret. Chapter 5. Unveiling. 2 days after Perry's arrest, Nolan received a call from an unfamiliar number. Mr. Foster? This is Detective Miranda Rivera, Portland Police Department. We'd like to speak with you regarding Perry Thornton and the Thornton Development Group. Nolan had been expecting this. Of course, Detective. How can I help? We understand your wife worked closely with Mr. Thornton and that you had invested in his latest project. Ex-wife. Soon enough, Nolan corrected mildly. And yes, I had investments with Thornton Development. We'd appreciate if you could come in and make a statement. I'll be there in an hour. The police station buzzed with activity. Detective Rivera, a sharp-eyed woman with silver-streaked hair and a no-nonsense demeanor, led Nolan to a small interview room. "Thank you for coming in, Mr. Foster," she said, activating a recorder. "Can you tell me about your relationship with Perry Thornton?" "I met him through my wife," Nolan explained. "She worked for his company. I had little direct interaction with him. Yet you invested nearly $2 million in his project." Nolan frowned. "No, I didn't. My wife transferred that money without my knowledge or consent while I was overseas on business." Rivera's eyebrows rose. "You're claiming theft?" "I'm stating a fact," Nolan replied calmly. "I have documentation showing the transfers occurred without my authorization. I've already provided this to my attorney." "And you didn't report this theft?" "I only discovered it recently, upon my return. I was gathering evidence before taking legal action." The questioning continued for an hour. Nolan answered truthfully but selectively, painting himself as a victim of circumstances, a successful businessman whose trust had been betrayed. "One last question, Mr. Foster," Rivera said. "Given your background in security and military operations, is there any reason why someone might think you had the capability to orchestrate financial maneuvers to frame Mr. Thornton?" Nolan met her gaze steadily. "Detective, I run a legitimate security firm specializing in corporate protection and crisis response. If I had wanted to orchestrate anything, I wouldn't have let my wife steal $2 million from me." Rivera nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Thank you for your time. We may have additional questions later." As Nolan left the station, he spotted Vanessa in the waiting area, looking pale and anxious. Their eyes met briefly before he walked past without acknowledgement. Back at Damon's apartment, Nolan reviewed the day's developments with his team. "The detective suspects something," he admitted. "She's sharp, but she has no proof," Reese pointed out. "All evidence points to Perry." "For now," Nolan agreed. "But we need to accelerate the timeline." Layla reports that Vanessa's lawyers are requesting an emergency hearing regarding the divorce settlement. "She's after what's left of your assets," Damon surmised. "Yes, and we're going to let her think she can get them." The next morning, Nola met with Layla to discuss strategy. Her lawyers are claiming emotional distress and abandonment, Layla reported, disgusted. "They're painting her as a loyal wife who made poor decisions under Perry's influence while you were consistently absent pursuing business interests." "What are they asking for?" "Half of your remaining assets and ongoing support." Nola nodded thoughtfully. "Counter with this. I'll provide a one-time settlement of $500,000 on condition that she sign a complete release of all future claims." Layla looked surprised. "That's more generous than I expected." "It's bait," Nolan replied. "She'll think I'm desperate to be done with this, that I'm willing to pay to make her go away. Her greed will do the rest. And if she accepts, she won't get the money," Nolan said flatly, "because by then, she'll be facing criminal charges of her own." Meanwhile, Sophia had been making discoveries of her own. Using her remaining access to Thornton Development, she'd uncovered a pattern of communications between Vanessa and another Thornton executive, Brian Walsh. They were working together from the beginning, Sophia told Nolan, showing him emails dated months before Nolan's trip to Singapore. Vanessa wasn't Perry's victim, she was his partner. And when things started going south, they were planning to pin everything on Perry and take the remaining assets. Walsh wasn't arrested. No, he's been cooperating with investigators, claiming he discovered irregularities and reported them. Nolan smiled coldly. "Give me everything you can on Walsh. Every email, every text, every meeting with Vanessa." The following day, Brian Walsh received an anonymous package. Inside was a USB drive containing every communication he'd had with Vanessa about their plan to betray Perry, along with a note. "The FBI gets these tomorrow. Unless..." Walsh called Vanessa immediately. "We have a problem," he said when she answered. "Someone knows." "Knows what?" Vanessa asked, her voice tight. Everything. The plan, the diverted funds, the offshore accounts. They have our emails, our texts, everything. That's not possible, Vanessa insisted. We were careful. Well, someone wasn't careful enough, Walsh hissed. They're threatening to send it all to the FBI unless... Unless what? They want the access codes to the Cayman account. Vanessa felt the blood drain from her face. The Cayman account contained the funds they'd managed to divert before Perry's arrest. Nearly $1 million that was supposed to be their safety net. It has to be Nolan, she whispered. He's always been 2 steps ahead. I don't care who it is, Walsh snapped. What are we going to do? Nothing, Vanessa decided after a moment. It's a bluff. They can't have everything. And even if they did, it would implicate them too. Whoever they are. You're willing to risk federal charges? I'm willing to see if they're bluffing. Give it 24 hours. 24 hours later, FBI agents arrested Brian Walsh as he attempted to board a flight to Mexico. The evidence against him was comprehensive and damning, and it included numerous communications with Vanessa. When Nolan heard the news, he was meeting with Layla. Now we wait, he said. Vanessa will be next. Unless she runs, Layla pointed out. She won't run, Nolan said confidently. She still thinks she can win. He was right. Instead of fleeing, Vanessa called an emergency meeting with her divorce attorneys. Their new strategy: claim complete ignorance of any wrongdoing and push for an immediate settlement before charges could be filed. She's offering to accept your terms, Layla reported afterwards. $500,000, clean break, no future claims. Perfect, Nolan smiled. Draw up the papers. I'll sign them today. You're really going through with this? Layla asked, puzzled. Giving her $500,000 after everything she's done? Trust me, Nolan said. She'll never see a penny of it. The next morning, as Vanessa arrived at her attorney's office to sign the divorce settlement, she was met by Detective Rivera and 2 FBI agents. The charges: conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and misappropriation of investor funds. As she was being led away in handcuffs, she looked up to see Nolan watching from across the street. Their eyes met, and in that moment, she finally understood. She had never been in control. From the very beginning, from the moment she had betrayed him, he had been orchestrating her downfall. And he had done it without ever raising his voice or making a single threat. He had simply let her own actions destroy her. Chapter 6: Retribution. Perry Thornton sat in the visitation room of the county jail, the orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to his usual tailored suits. Across the table, Nolan Foster waited patiently, his face expressionless. Why are you here? Perry asked, his voice hoarse. The past month of incarceration had aged him, his once confident demeanor replaced by a hunted look. To make you an offer, Nolan replied simply. Perry laughed bitterly. What could you possibly offer me? A way out. Nolan leaned forward. The evidence against you is substantial, but not all of it is genuine. Some of it was creatively edited. You framed me, Perry said flatly. I helped the truth emerge, Nolan corrected. You were stealing from investors. That's fact. The only fabrication was protecting Vanessa temporarily. So what's this offer? Testify against Vanessa. Tell the prosecutors everything about her involvement. In exchange, certain key pieces of evidence against you will be discovered to be unreliable. Perry's eyes narrowed. You want me to help you destroy your wife? Ex-wife, Nolan corrected. And she was never just your victim, was she? She approached you with the idea of using my connections and resources. She suggested using the power of attorney to access my accounts. She was the architect, not you. Perry studied Nolan's face. You already know. I know everything, Nolan confirmed. I just need you to confirm it officially. And if I refuse, then additional evidence will surface linking you to other investment frauds across 3 states. Your sentence will go from years to decades. Perry was silent for a long moment. She said you were weak, he finally murmured. That you would never fight back. That you were too honorable, too straight arrow. She was wrong, Nolan said simply. 2 days later, Perry Thornton signed a comprehensive plea agreement. In exchange for a reduced sentence, he provided detailed testimony about Vanessa's role in the scheme, including evidence that she had been planning it for over a year. When Nolan received confirmation from Layla that the plea had been accepted, he met with Sophia and her mysterious ally, who turned out to be Harrison Wells, Thornton Development's former CFO, who had been forced out when he questioned financial irregularities. Perry's testimony changes everything for Vanessa's case, Layla explained in a conference call. She can no longer claim she was manipulated or uninformed. The prosecution has upgraded the charges to include conspiracy and premeditated fraud. What's she looking at? Harrison asked. With the evidence they have now, 8 to 10 years, minimum. No possibility of a plea deal after she already tried to shift all blame to Perry. Nolan nodded, satisfied. And the settlement money? Frozen, Layla confirmed. The judge invalidated the divorce agreement pending resolution of the criminal charges. She won't see a penny. After the call ended, Sophia looked at Nolan curiously. Is it enough? After what she did to you? Nolan considered the question. It's not about what's enough, he finally said. It's about justice. She chose to betray everything we built together. Now she faces the consequences of that choice. That's very measured of you, Harrison observed. Nolan smiled thinly. I didn't say I was finished. The next phase of Nolan's plan targeted the personal betrayal, not just the financial one. Using the surveillance equipment he'd installed in the penthouse, he had compiled months of recordings, Vanessa and Perry mocking him, laughing about how they had deceived him, planning their future with his money. These recordings, edited to remove any indication of illegal surveillance, were provided to Vanessa's defense attorney as discovered evidence. The lawyer, already struggling with an increasingly unwinnable case, was horrified by the content. Your client's character will be eviscerated if these become public, he warned Vanessa during a jailhouse meeting. No jury will sympathize with someone who speaks about their spouse this way. Where did these come from? Vanessa demanded, pale after listening to her own voice cruelly mimicking Nolan's dedication to his company. The prosecution won't say, but they're authenticated. It's definitely you and Thornton. What Vanessa didn't know was that Nolan had no intention of having the recordings admitted as evidence. Their sole purpose was to make her realize how completely she had been outmaneuvered and to ensure her lawyer understood the hopelessness of her position. Meanwhile, Nolan had reclaimed his life. With Perry and Vanessa both facing prosecution, their assets had been frozen and were being unwound to repay investors. Nolan's security firm had weathered the storm, his reputation intact due to his transparent cooperation with authorities. He had purchased a new home, smaller than before, but with a view of the mountains he had always wanted. Damon had moved in temporarily, while Reese had returned to field operations. Sophia and Harrison had both joined Nolan's company, their expertise in financial security proving invaluable. One evening, as Nolan sat on his deck watching the sunset, Damon joined him with 2 beers. Vanessa's lawyer reached out to Layla today, Damon reported. They want to discuss a plea deal directly with you, bypassing the prosecutors. Nolan took a long sip of his beer. They're desperate. Very. The lawyer thinks she's looking at a decade minimum. She's offering to relinquish all claims to any assets in exchange for your support for leniency. After everything, she still thinks I can be manipulated, Nolan mused. Still thinks I'll soften if she appears contrite. Will you meet with her? Nolan considered for a long moment. Yes. One last time. The meeting took place in the attorney's office. Vanessa, brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs, looked nothing like the confident, stylish woman who had laughed at him on the phone months ago. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow. Thank you for coming, she said when they were alone, the guards waiting outside. I was curious about what you thought you could offer me, Nolan replied, his voice neutral. I'll sign whatever you want. All rights to our assets, the company shares, everything. Just please tell them I cooperated. Ask for leniency. Why would I do that? Tears filled her eyes. Because despite everything, we were married for 5 years. Because I'm sorry. Because I made a terrible mistake. A mistake, Nolan repeated. Is that what you call it? Systematically stealing from me, destroying my possessions, conspiring with your lover to take everything I built? I was wrong, she whispered. I listened to those recordings, and I don't even recognize myself. Perry, he changed me, made me believe you didn't care about us. only about the business. Don't blame Perry, Nolan said coldly. He may have provided the opportunity, but you made the choice. And you enjoyed it. I heard the laughter, Vanessa. I heard the contempt. Please, she begged. I can't survive 10 years in prison. Nolan stood. You told Perry I was weak, that I would never fight back. You were wrong about that, just like you were wrong about so many things. Nolan, the investigators found most of the missing investor money, he continued, cutting her off. But not all of it. There's still about $2 million unaccounted for. They think you and Perry hid it offshore. Hope flickered in her eyes. If I helped them find it, would you support a reduced sentence? Nolan smiled thinly. The money doesn't exist, Vanessa. It never left my control. I moved it before you could steal it, then created a paper trail, making it look like you had taken it. So while you're serving time for stealing $2 million, the money will be rebuilding the lives you helped destroy. The color drained from her face as understanding dawned. You set us up from the beginning. No, Nolan corrected. I merely gave you enough rope to hang yourselves. Every crime you're charged with, you actually committed. I just made sure there was evidence. Why? She whispered. Why not just divorce me when you suspected I was cheating? Nolan leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. Because you didn't just betray me as a husband. You betrayed everything I stood for. You thought you could take my life apart piece by piece. You laughed while doing it. His eyes hardened. I told you not to regret it. Now you understand why. He stood and walked to the door, then paused. One more thing. There was a trust fund in your name, money I'd set aside for our future, for the family we talked about having. $5 million. I've donated it all to a foundation that helps victims of financial fraud. He smiled coldly. Seems fitting. As he left, Vanessa's sobs echoed behind him. For a moment, he felt a twinge of not regret exactly, recognition, perhaps, of what they had once been to each other. But it passed quickly. The woman he had loved had never truly existed. Outside, Damon was waiting by the car. How did it go? It's over, Nolan said simply. Let's go home. Chapter 7. Reconstruction. 6 months after Vanessa's conviction, Nolan stood in the lobby of Foster Security's new headquarters, surveying the space with quiet satisfaction. The company had not just survived the scandal. It had thrived, with Nolan's reputation for integrity attracting clients who value discretion and ethical practices. The Tokyo team just confirmed the Nakamura contract, Damon reported, joining him. That's 3 major international deals this quarter. Nolan nodded. The restructuring is working. After the dust had settled, Nolan had reimagined his company. No longer focused solely on physical security and risk management, Foster Security now specialized in financial protection and fraud prevention. Sophia headed the financial intelligence division, while Harrison led a team dedicated to helping victims of investment scams recover their assets. The investigative committee called again. Damon continued. They want you to testify about security vulnerabilities in investment firms. Schedule it. Nolan agreed. It's time we started changing the system that allows people like Perry to operate. The scandal surrounding Thornton Development had exposed weaknesses in regulatory oversight. Several officials had resigned amid accusations of accepting bribes to overlook violations. The resulting investigations had created an opportunity for meaningful reform, one Nolan intended to influence. Later that day, Nolan met with Layla to discuss a new initiative. The Foster Foundation, Layla summarized, reviewing the documents, dedicated to helping victims of financial fraud rebuild their lives. Initial funding $5 million. She looked up at him. The money for Vanessa's trust. Seems appropriate, Nolan said. Money that was meant to build our future will help others rebuild theirs. And speaking of futures, Layla continued, the final asset distribution from Thornton Development was approved yesterday. After restitution to investors, there's a substantial amount returning to you, approximately $1.3 million. Added to the foundation's endowment, Nolan decided. I don't want or need that money. Layla nodded, making a note. That's remarkably generous. It's not generosity, Nolan corrected. It's closure. That evening, Nolan hosted a small gathering at his home. Damon, Reese, Sophia, Harrison, and Layla. As they sat on his deck watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Sophia raised her glass. To new beginnings, she proposed. And to lessons learned, Harrison added. Nolan nodded, raising his own glass. To both. After the others had gone, Damon remained, helping Nolan clear away the glasses and bottles. You seem different lately, Damon observed. More at peace. Nolan considered this. I spent months focused on making them pay. On justice, or revenge, or whatever you want to call it. It consumed me. He looked out at the darkening mountains. Now I'm ready to build something new. Any regrets? Damon asked carefully. About exposing their crimes? No. Nolan was silent for a moment. About the marriage itself? Maybe. I was absent too often. Focused on the business to the exclusion of everything else. I didn't create what Vanessa became, but I might have contributed to the conditions that made her vulnerable to someone like Perry. That's very evolved of you, Damon said with a hint of surprise. Nolan smiled faintly. Don't mistake understanding for forgiveness. I still believe they deserved everything that happened to them, but I've learned my own lessons from this. Later that night, alone in his study, Nolan opened his laptop and checked the secure email account he used for confidential communications. Among the messages was one from a prison email address. Vanessa. For a long moment, his cursor hovered over the delete button. Then, curiosity winning out, he opened it. Nolan, it began. I don't expect forgiveness or even a response. But I need you to know that despite everything, despite what I became, there was a time when what we had was real. I destroyed that, and I will live with that knowledge every day for the next 8 years. You were right. I do regret it. Not just the consequences, but the choices themselves. The person I see in those recordings isn't someone I recognize or want to be. Prison has a way of forcing honesty. I am sorry, for whatever that's worth. V. Nolan read it twice, then closed the laptop without replying. Some doors were closed permanently. Some betrayals couldn't be undone. What mattered now was the future he was building, for himself, for his company, and for those he could help. The house was quiet around him. Not lonely, exactly, but peaceful. In time, perhaps he would share it again. But for now, this solitude was healing, a space where he could rebuild not just his life, but himself. His phone buzzed. A text from Reese about a potential new client, a family office concerned about investment fraud. Nolan smiled slightly. Life continued. The work continued. And in that continuity lay strength. Forward, he murmured to himself. It was both a direction and a promise. Chapter 8. Revelation. 1 year to the day after his return from Singapore, Nolan received an unexpected visitor. Detective Miranda Rivera, now Lieutenant Rivera, waited in the lobby of Foster Securities headquarters. Lieutenant. Nolan greeted her, ushering her into his office. This is a surprise. A pleasant one, I hope, she replied, settling into the chair he offered. I've been following your company's evolution with interest. Your work with fraud prevention has made waves. Thank you, but something tells me this isn't a social call. Rivera smiled slightly. Perceptive as always, Mr. Foster. She placed a file on his desk. We've been investigating a series of investment frauds similar to Thornton's operation. Different players, same techniques. Nolan opened the file, scanning the contents. I see the pattern. What's the connection to me? One of the principals, Alan Mercer, was Brian Walsh's college roommate. We've tracked communications between them dating back to before the Thornton collapse. Nolan's eyes narrowed. You think this is connected to my case? I think, Rivera said carefully, that the Thornton case was possibly part of a larger pattern. And I think you might have insights that could help us connect the dots. Over the next hour, Nolan reviewed the evidence Rivera had brought. The similarities were striking, not just in the fraud techniques, but in the targeting of specific types of investors, the use of real estate developments as fronts, and the laundering methods. It's like a franchise operation, Nolan observed. Different locations, same business model. Exactly, Rivera agreed. And we believe there's someone coordinating it all. A mastermind who provides the templates, the connections, and takes a percentage of the proceeds. And you think this person was connected to Thornton's operation? We know they were. Rivera pulled out another document, a bank statement showing regular transfers from Thornton Development to a company called Nexus Consulting. These payments were consistent, every month for 3 years. But Nexus doesn't exist, at least not as a real company. It's a shell. Have you spoken to Perry or Vanessa about this? Perry claims ignorance, says Vanessa handled those payments. Vanessa refuses to discuss it. Nolan leaned back, considering, why come to me with this? Rivera met his gaze directly. Because I think you know more than you've shared. About the money, about the connections, about everything. For a long moment, Nolan was silent. Then he made a decision. I have a theory, he said finally. But it's just that, a theory. I never found concrete proof. I'm listening. There's a man named Lawrence Blackwood, former hedge fund manager, retired officially 10 years ago after an SEC investigation that never quite stuck. He specializes in what he calls creative finance. And you think he's the mastermind? I think he creates the architecture for these operations, trains the principals, and provides the networks needed to move money undetected. In exchange, he takes a percentage and remains completely insulated from any legal consequences. How do you know about him? Nolan smiled thinly. I make it my business to know about threats in the financial world. When I started investigating Thornton and Vanessa, Blackwood's name came up tangentially. Nothing concrete enough to pursue. Where can we find him? That's the million-dollar question. He moves constantly, never stays in one place long enough to establish patterns. But Nolan paused, then continued. I might know someone who can help locate him. After Rivera left, with promises to share any information he uncovered, Nolan called Sophia into his office. We need to talk about Lawrence Blackwood, he said without preamble. Sophia's expression remained neutral, but her shoulders tensed slightly. What about him? The police are connecting dots, Nolan explained. They've identified the pattern linking Thornton to other similar operations. It's only a matter of time before they follow the trail to Blackwood. And that concerns us because... Nolan leaned forward. Because you and Harrison have been tracking him for the past 6 months. Because your sister wasn't just another victim of Perry's. She was deliberately targeted as part of Blackwood's operation. And because we both know Vanessa was Blackwood's protege long before she met Perry. Sophia's composure cracked slightly. How long have you known? I suspected from the beginning, Nolan admitted. The operation was too sophisticated, too well executed to be Perry's work. He was the front man, the charming face. Vanessa was the real operator trained by Blackwood. When I started unraveling their scheme, I found traces of a larger pattern. Why didn't you say anything? Because I wasn't certain. And because your motivations were genuine, even if you weren't telling me everything. Nolan's voice softened. I understood your need for justice for your sister. I still do. Sophia sank into a chair. We're close to finding him, she said after a moment. Harrison has tracked financial movements that suggest he's operating from Portugal now. We have an address, security details, everything. Good, Nolan nodded. Because we're going to hand him to the authorities. Sophia looked up sharply. That wasn't the plan. Plans change, Nolan said firmly. Revenge might feel satisfying, but justice serves more people. Blackwood has orchestrated dozens of these schemes, ruined countless lives. The best way to honor your sister is to make sure he can never do it again. And Vanessa? Sophia asked. If Blackwood goes down, her involvement with him will come to light. She might get a reduced sentence for cooperating. That's a possibility, Nolan acknowledged. But it's not my concern anymore. My focus is on stopping the system that creates more victims. If Vanessa benefits from that incidentally, so be it. Later that evening, Nolan briefed Damon on the development. So Vanessa was working for this Blackwood character all along. Damon asked, incredulous. Before she even met Perry? I believe so, Nolan confirmed. It explains a lot. How she managed the financial side so efficiently. How she knew exactly which documents to forge, which accounts to target. Then your marriage. Was it ever real? Nolan paused, considering. I don't know, he admitted finally. Maybe in the beginning. Maybe never. It doesn't matter now. And you're okay with potentially helping her get a reduced sentence? I'm okay with doing what's right, Nolan replied. Blackwood is the greater threat. Stopping him matters more than my personal feelings about Vanessa. That's remarkably noble, Damon observed. Nolan smiled wryly. Not nobility, perspective. This was never just about Vanessa and Perry, or even about what they did to me. It was about a system that enables predators like Blackwood to operate with impunity. Taking him down serves a greater purpose than seeing Vanessa serve her full sentence. Over the next week, Nolan worked closely with Sophia, Harrison, and Lieutenant Rivera, compiling evidence against Lawrence Blackwood. The web was vast and complex, spanning multiple countries and involving dozens of shell companies, but gradually a clear picture emerged. "We have enough for international warrants," Rivera announced during a strategy meeting. Financial crimes units in 3 countries are coordinating to make simultaneous moves on his known locations. When? Nolan asked. 72 hours. Absolute secrecy until then. If he gets even a hint we're coming, he'll disappear. After the meeting, Sophia lingered in Nolan's office. "There's something else you should know," she said hesitantly. "About Vanessa." Nolan raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "She's been writing to Harrison, offering information about Blackwood in exchange for our help reducing her sentence. Has she provided anything useful? Account numbers, contact methods, even details about his security protocols." Sophia paused. "She also included personal messages. For you." Nolan's expression remained neutral. "I'm not interested in her personal messages." "She claims she was coerced," Sophia continued, ignoring his response. "That Blackwood threatened her family if she didn't cooperate. That's why she targeted you, because your security background made you valuable to their operation." "Do you believe her?" Sophia hesitated. "I don't know. The information she's provided about Blackwood has checked out. But whether her motivations were fear or greed." She shrugged. "Only she knows that." Nolan was silent for a long moment. Forward the information to Rivera, he decided. Vanessa can make her case to the prosecutors. It's not my judgment to make anymore. 2 days later, as final preparation for the Blackwood operation were underway, Nolan received an urgent call from Rivera. "We have a problem," she said without preamble. "Blackwood's gone." "What happened?" Someone warned him. His Portugal location was cleared out 12 hours ago. He left behind a message. "Give my regards to Foster." Nolan felt a cold certainty settle in his stomach. He knows we're coming. "Worse," Rivera continued. "We think we know who warned him. Vanessa Foster was found unconscious in her cell this morning. The security system malfunctioned. No cameras for 7 minutes. She's in critical condition. Was it an attempt on her life? Unclear. But before she lost consciousness, she managed to write something. LB knows. Run." Nolan hung up and immediately activated the company's emergency protocols. If Blackwood knew they were targeting him, and if he was as connected as Nolan suspected, none of them were safe. Within an hour, Sophia and Harrison were on secure transport to a safe house, while Damon coordinated enhanced security at the office. Nolan himself remained at headquarters, converting the crisis room into a command center. "We need to assume he has resources within law enforcement," Nolan told the assembled team. "Limited communication, secure channels only. No one goes anywhere alone." As night fell, Nolan reviewed security footage from around the building. Nothing unusual, but the sense of being watched persisted. Blackwood was a shadow, a ghost in the system. If he wanted to strike, he would find a way. Just after midnight, Nolan's secure phone buzzed, an alert from the perimeter sensors at his home. Someone had breached the property. The security cameras showed a single figure moving with practiced efficiency, bypassing the alarm systems. Nolan considered his options. Police would be too slow and potentially compromised. His own security team was focused on protecting Sophia and Harrison. That left him. Making his decision, Nolan armed himself and headed for his home. If Blackwood wanted a confrontation, he would get one. Chapter 9. Reckoning. The night air was crisp as Nolan approached his property, moving silently through the trees that bordered his backyard. The house was dark, the only light coming from the moon reflecting off the windows. His security system had been disabled with professional precision. Not destroyed, but temporarily bypassed. Nolan circled the perimeter, identifying entry and exit points. Whoever was inside was still there. The perimeter sensors hadn't registered anyone leaving. Using a secondary access code, he reactivated a single camera in his home office, its feed streaming to his secure phone. The image showed a man sitting calmly at Nolan's desk, as if he belonged there. Even in the low light, Nolan recognized Lawrence Blackwood from the dossier Sophia had compiled. Mid-60s, silver hair, the polished appearance of old money. Nolan entered through the basement, moving silently up the stairs. Years of military and security work had trained him for moments like this. He could feel his heart rate slow, his senses sharpen. The familiar calm of operational focus settled over him. The door to his office was ajar, a sliver of moonlight cutting across the hallway. Nolan positioned himself carefully, then pushed the door open with his foot, weapon raised. "Mr. Foster," Blackwood greeted him without turning around. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't show. Hands where I can see them," Nolan ordered, entering the room. Blackwood complied, raising his hands slightly. "I'm unarmed. This isn't that kind of meeting. Breaking into my home suggests otherwise. A necessary precaution. You've become quite the crusader lately, dismantling my operations, rallying the authorities." Blackwood turned in the chair, facing Nolan fully. "I wanted to see for myself what kind of man has caused me so much trouble." Nolan kept his weapon trained on Blackwood. "If you're here to threaten me, save your breath." "Threats?" Blackwood chuckled. "No, Mr. Foster. I'm here to make you an offer. I'm not interested. You haven't heard it yet." Blackwood gestured to the chair opposite the desk. "Please sit. I promise this will be worth your time." After a moment's hesitation, Nolan took the seat, keeping his weapon ready. "Talk. You've impressed me," Blackwood began. "Few people have come as close to unraveling my network as you have. Your combination of technical expertise, financial acumen, and tactical skill is rare. Flattery won't get you anywhere. Not flattery, appreciation. Do you know how tedious it becomes, working with less capable minds? Perry Thornton, for instance, charming but ultimately shallow. Even your wife, for all her skills, lacked your moral complexity. Ex-wife," Nolan corrected automatically. "Ah, yes. A pity about Vanessa. She had such potential." Blackwood shook his head. "I warned her not to underestimate you. But she believes she knew you better than anyone." "Why are you here?" Nolan demanded, growing impatient. "Because you've created a problem for me," Blackwood replied candidly. "And when I have a problem, I prefer to solve it intelligently. Killing you would be inelegant and ultimately ineffective, given the safeguards you've no doubt established. So instead you break into my home for a chat. I'm offering you a partnership." Blackwood leaned forward. "Your security expertise combined with my financial network. Together we could revolutionize the industry, legitimately. No more fraud, no more victims. Real security for those who can afford it." Nolan stared at him, incredulous. "You expect me to believe you want to go legitimate? At my age, Mr. Foster, legal complications become tiresome. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. What I lack is a legacy, something meaningful to leave behind." Blackwood's expression seemed almost wistful. "You've demonstrated what's possible with the Foster Foundation. Imagine what we could accomplish together." For a moment, Nolan was silent, studying the man before him. Blackwood was either an exceptional actor or genuinely sincere. Either way, his proposal was absurd. "You've orchestrated schemes that have destroyed countless lives," Nolan said finally. "You recruited my wife to betray me. You had Vanessa attacked in prison when she threatened to expose you. And now you want me to believe you're interested in redemption." Blackwood's expression hardened slightly. "The attack on Vanessa wasn't my doing. There are others involved in these operations, people who don't share my nuanced approach to problem solving." "Who?" "That's part of what I'm offering, information. Names, accounts, operations currently in progress. Everything you need to dismantle the network entirely. In exchange for immunity, a fresh start, and your expertise in building something worthwhile." Nolan considered the offer, or pretended to. In reality, He was waiting for confirmation that the recording devices he'd activated remotely were capturing everything. His phone vibrated once in his pocket, the signal from Damon that the transmission was secure. "How do I know you're not recording this conversation to use against me later?" Blackwood asked suddenly, as if reading his thoughts. "You don't," Nolan replied honestly. "Just as I don't know whether you have snipers positioned outside." Blackwood smiled thinly. "A standoff, then?" "Not quite." Nolan's phone vibrated again, twice this time. The prearranged signal that law enforcement was in position. "You made a fundamental miscalculation coming here, Blackwood." "Oh, you assumed I'd be interested in your offer. That I'd be tempted by the information, the resources, the chance to build something worthwhile." Nolan leaned forward. "But here's what you didn't understand. I already have something worthwhile. And people like you, people who treat others as disposable, who destroy lives for profit, can never be part of it." Before Blackwood could respond, the night erupted with light and sound as tactical teams breached the property from multiple entry points. Within seconds, the office was flooded with armed officers, Lieutenant Rivera among them. "Lawrence Blackwood," she announced, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, wire fraud, money laundering, and a dozen other charges we'll detail later." As Blackwood was handcuffed and led away, he turned to Nolan one last time. "You could have had everything." "I already do," Nolan replied simply. Later, as the forensic teams processed the scene, Rivera joined Nolan on his deck. "He came right to you," she marveled. "Walked right into our hands." "His ego wouldn't allow another option," Nolan explained. "Men like Blackwood believe they can talk their way out of anything, that their intelligence makes them untouchable. Well, this time it made him catchable." Rivera handed him a preliminary report. "We've already seized accounts in 7 countries. The evidence he was carrying alone is enough to put him away for decades." Nolan nodded, satisfied. "And Vanessa?" "Stable. The doctors expect a full recovery." Rivera hesitated. "The attack appears to have been orchestrated by someone in Blackwood's organization, but not Blackwood himself. We're still investigating." "Will she cooperate?" "Her lawyer says yes. She's offering everything she knows in exchange for witness protection and a reduced sentence." Nolan absorbed this information silently. After all the betrayal, all the pain, Vanessa would likely emerge with less than half her original sentence. It should have bothered him more than it did. "Are you okay with that?" Rivera asked, watching his reaction. "I'm okay with justice being served," Nolan replied. Blackwood was always the bigger target. If Vanessa's cooperation helps ensure he never hurts anyone again, that's what matters. The following morning, Nolan hosted an emergency meeting with his team: Damon, Sophia, Harrison, Reese, and Layla. The capture of Blackwood had made national news, with Foster Security prominently mentioned as instrumental in the investigation. "Our phones haven't stopped ringing," Damon reported. "Everyone from government agencies to corporations wanting to strengthen their financial security protocols. The foundation has received over $1 million in donations overnight," Layla added. "People who lost money in these schemes are coming forward, wanting to support our work." Nolan looked around at the team he had built. People who had stood with him through the darkness of betrayal and emerged stronger on the other side. "A year ago, I came home to find my life torn apart," he said quietly. "Everything I thought I knew, everyone I thought I could trust, gone in an instant. And now?" Sophia asked. Nolan smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Now I understand that what was taken from me wasn't what mattered. It was what remained: my integrity, my purpose, the ability to rebuild something better." "So what's next?" Harrison inquired. "We continue the work," Nolan replied simply. "There are other Blackwoods out there, other schemes, other victims needing protection and justice. The Foundation expands its support programs. The company develops new security protocols. We keep moving forward." As the meeting concluded, Reese lingered behind. "There's one thing I've been wondering," he said when they were alone. "That day you came home, when you found the for sale sign, you told Vanessa, 'Don't regret it,' like you already knew what was coming." "I suspected," Nolan admitted. "The transfers had started months earlier. I'd been monitoring, gathering information, preparing for the possibility that she was involved in something questionable. I just didn't know how deep it went until that moment. So even then, you were already planning how to respond? Not planning exactly, but I understood that whatever was happening, it wasn't a simple betrayal. The scale, the timing, the precision, it felt orchestrated. Nolan's expression darkened briefly. What I didn't anticipate was how much it would hurt, hearing her laugh at me. Knowing she had thrown away my possessions, erased me from our home so completely. But you didn't let that control your response, Reese observed. No, Nolan agreed. I let it fuel me instead. Pain can be transformed into purpose, loss into determination. Later that evening, alone in his office, Nolan received an unexpected email. The sender was Vanessa, writing from her hospital bed through her attorney's secured system. By now you know everything, she had written. About Blackwood, about how we met, about why I targeted you. What you don't know, what I need you to know, is that somewhere along the way, it stopped being an operation for me. I fell in love with you, Nolan. Genuinely. That's why it took me so long to make my move, why Blackwood became impatient with me. The woman you married wasn't entirely a fiction. She was a part of me I hadn't known existed until I was with you. This isn't an excuse. There is no excuse for what I did. But as I face whatever future awaits me, I wanted you to know that the regret you predicted, it's not just about getting caught. It's about destroying something real and valuable. Something I didn't appreciate until it was gone. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope someday you can find happiness again. You, of all people, have earned it. Nolan read the message twice, a complex mix of emotions washing through him. There had been a time when words like these would have shattered him, would have made him question everything. Now, they were simply another piece of a puzzle that no longer needed solving. He closed the email without replying and turned his attention to a proposal for the Foundation's newest initiative, a program to help former victims of fraud rebuild their credit and financial security. There was work to be done, a future to build. Outside his window, the mountains were bathed in the gold of sunset, their peaks sharp against the deepening blue of the sky. Nolan paused for a moment, taking in the view. From destruction had come creation. From betrayal, strength. From an ending, a new beginning. The phone on his desk rang. Damon, calling about an emergency at a client site. Nolan smiled slightly as he picked it up. Life continued. The work continued. And in that continuity lay not just purpose, but peace. I'm on my way, he said, already reaching for his jacket. Another crisis, another challenge, another opportunity to make a difference. Forward, indeed. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.